In boxing, pain is expected. Fighters know what they're signing up for. Broken ribs, busted noses, concussions. But sometimes the danger doesn't come with gloves. Sometimes it comes with a trigger. This is the story of boxers who were shot and survived. Some were targeted, some were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But all of them had one thing in common. They refused to die. These are stories about violence, survival, and the fight beyond the ring. Christy Martin wasn't just a fighter in the ring, she was a fighter in life. Known as the coal miner's daughter, she shattered glass ceilings in boxing during the 1990s. She was the first female boxer to grace the cover of Sports Illustrated. She brought women's boxing to pay-per-view. But behind the gloves and the bright lights, Christy was living a secret life of pain and fear. Her husband, Jim Martin, also her trainer, was abusive for years. The control wasn't just emotional, it was physical, it was manipulative, and in 2010, after Christy finally told him she was leaving, the nightmare reached its peak. Jim stabbed her multiple times in the chest and leg. Then he pulled out a handgun and shot her in the back. He left her to die in their Florida home, but Christy didn't die. Bleeding, gasping, and barely conscious, she crawled to the door and made it to the street. A neighbor saw her, called 911, and rushed to help. She lived, not just physically, but fully. Christy recovered. She testified against Jim in court, watching him get sentenced to 25 years to life. And after surviving what should have been the end, she walked back into a boxing ring, not to fight again, but to own her story. Today, she's a Hall of Famer, a promoter, and an advocate for women in abusive relationships. Her wounds are visible, her story is known. But what defines Christy Martin isn't just survival, it's the strength to speak when silence would have been easier. She wasn't just shot, she was hunted, and she still refused to go down.
Look at me, Jim. Look at me. From the beginning, I financially supported you, your family, and any and all of your significant others. And the only repayment I asked for many times was for you to let me go. Not harmed physically, emotionally, or professionally. How was I repaid for taking care of you all those years? Blackmailed, addicted to coke, you sharing what I thought was private sex acts. But what really stands above all these things is you leaving me for dead on the bedroom floor. You coloring your hair and taking a shower. Leaving me there, dead, stabbed, shot, bleeding.
Terence Crawford was already a rising prospect in 2008. Undefeated, fast, hungry, but outside the ring, life was far from stable. On a regular night in Omaha, Nebraska, Crawford was shooting dice with friends. He had a few bucks in his pocket and nothing on his mind but the next throw. After winning a couple rounds, he called it a night and climbed into his old school Cutlass Supreme. That's when the unimaginable happened. As he sat in the car, counting his money, a bullet ripped through the back window and struck him in the head, right below the ear. No warning, no argument, just a single shot from behind. Crawford didn't freeze. He didn't black out. He drove himself to the hospital, one hand on the wheel, the other holding pressure against the wound. He survived. The shooter was never found, and in the weeks that followed, he was back in the gym like nothing happened. That bullet could have ended his career, could have ended his life. Instead, it became part of his story, a scar behind the ear, a reminder of the streets he came from, and the mindset that made him a champion. For Crawford, survival wasn't luck, it was instinct. Jose Benavidez Jr. had talent in his blood. The brother of David Benavidez and once the youngest Golden Gloves champion in history, Jose looked destined for greatness. But in 2016, he faced a moment that nearly took all of that away. On August 23, 2016, just before midnight, Jose Benavidez Jr. stepped out near his Phoenix home to walk his exotic dog he described as like a cheetah. Jose was a rising star in boxing. At 22, he'd already won the interim WBA super lightweight title and was climbing the welterweight ranks. But that quiet night changed everything. He noticed a man, thin mustache, sideburns, hoodie, hands in his pockets. The man asked, "Does your dog bite?" "I'm scared of dogs." Jose bent down to grab the schnauzer, and that's when the first shot hit him in the leg, tearing through a main artery. As he fell, a second shot clipped his right pinky. The gunman raised the gun again, but then paused, glancing behind Jose. Startled by something unseen, bleeding, Jose stared him down and cursed him out. Jose somehow crawled back home. His girlfriend was washing dishes, unaware he was bleeding out just outside. Doctors told him he might never walk again, let alone fight. A suspect was never found. Some say the shooter had been watching him. Maybe it was the same guy who torched his car months earlier. After 2 years of recovery, Jose did the impossible. He returned to the ring and fought for a world title. He didn't win, but just stepping through those ropes again proved he never stopped being a fighter. For Manuel Char, violence didn't come from the streets. It came from his social media comment section. In 2015, the German-Lebanese heavyweight got into a heated argument on Facebook. It was supposed to end with angry words, but instead, it ended with blood. Char went to a kebab shop in Essen to meet the man he'd argued with. The man pulled up in a car, stepped out, and fired 4 times. Bullets ripped through Char's stomach. He collapsed on the floor of the restaurant as customers scrambled. He was rushed into emergency surgery and died on the operating table, but doctors brought him back. He had survived the unthinkable. Most fighters would have walked away after something like that, but 2 years later, Char stepped into the ring again and won the WBA heavyweight title. He became a champion, a man once declared clinically dead, now holding a belt above his head. Some boxers earned titles, others clawed their way back from death to claim them. SubrielMatias didn't grow up in privilege. He came from the hard edges of Puerto Rico, where fights didn't always end with a referee stepping in. In 2012, years before he would become one of the most feared punchers in boxing, Matias was shot in an undisclosed confrontation. The details are scarce. Puerto Rican media reported the incident quietly, and Matias rarely speaks on it. But what's known is this: he was hit, he survived, and he disappeared for a while. He served time in prison for other crimes, and by the time he was released, boxing was no longer just a dream, it was a way out. SubrielMatias returned with a chip on his shoulder and dynamite in both hands. His style is brutal, relentless. He don't dance, he don't hug, he comes to hurt, and fans notice. By 2020, he was being called a future world champion, but underneath the rise was a darker origin, a near-death experience that shaped him long before the cameras ever caught his knockouts. Matias wasn't just fighting opponents, he was fighting fate. Boxing is a sport built on endurance, not just in the ring, but in life. The stories you just heard are more than just about punches thrown or titles won. They're about survival against impossible odds. Being shot should have ended their stories. Instead, it became the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter written in pain, recovery, and resilience. These fighters remind us that true toughness isn't measured by knockouts, it's measured by what you do when the lights are off, when no crowd is watching, and your only opponent is death itself. And that's all I got for you. Don't forget to drop a like, a subscribe, a comment, and share. Do all that good stuff for me. Until next time.